Hi, I'm Erin, and welcome to the Catalytic Leader Podcast, Episode 3. We are excited to have you today. I've had the opportunity to spend time as a participant with Fred, Michael, and Jerry in this journey of becoming a catalytic leader. I'm a young pastor, and their input has been helpful. So today we're going to dive into talking about equippers. What does it look like to be an equipper? What does it look like to raise others to do the work of the ministry? We're going to look at Ephesians 4 and how we all have different gifts and different strengths and things that the Spirit has gifted us. We're going to talk a little bit about diversity and unity within the church. And then finally, we're going to talk about the gifts and the parts of the body within the church and how we can raise them to head out into the world to be on mission in the places we live, work, and play. We're glad you're here with us. Take a listen.
Hey everybody, welcome to Catalytic Leaders Podcast. I'm here with my friends Michael and Fred, and we are excited for episode 3. So if you've been along for the ride with us so far, you know that we as Church of God Northwest have really been pressing into kind of a threefold vision of developing these catalytic leaders who are equippers, abiders, and missionaries. And in our first session, first podcast, we talked a lot about just that overview. In our last podcast, we talked about what it means to be an abider. And so if you haven't yet jumped onto that podcast, we encourage you to go back and listen to that. But today, we're going to talk about what it means to be an equipper as a catalytic leader. Fred, give us a definition of what it means to be an equipper as a catalytic leader.
Well, last time we talked about it, I was so excited about my new
Oh,
toy.
that's right.
My kids brought me this $600 golf club because they felt I was ill-equipped for the game of golf.
Indeed,
Nice.
you were. Yes.
But this thing has some kind of a dial here, a dial back here, and then there's some stuff on the side here. I don't know how it works, but all I know is my shots don't go like this anymore. They go this way.
That is impressive.
I almost forgot. I also have extra thick grips for my hands. So now I can hit the ball. And because as my son says, I'm old now, instead of a stiff shaft, I have this bendable thing that's supposed to give me that extra when I swing. And then a really nice leather cover to go over it so I don't bang it all up.
Or so you can tell all your show all your friends you got the newest in technology, right? That's the only reason to use those head covers. It's not really about banging the cover to say, hey, look at the new equipment I got, right? Yeah.
Well, the way I look at it now is I'm going to have a perfect golf game, maybe not. But besides that, we're talking about equipping. And what is an equipper? And it's really a leader who raises up and empowers others to do the work of the ministry. And it comes from a perspective, if I can read just a little bit of scripture here, when Paul writes about unity in the body in Ephesians 4, starting with verse 7, he says, he has given each one of us a special gift through the generosity of Christ. That is why the scriptures say, when he ascended to the heights, he led a crowd of captives, and he gave gifts to his peoples. And then he goes on, and he says, now these are the gifts, verse 11, Christ gave to the church, the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, and the pastors and teachers. Their responsibility is to equip God's people to do his work and build up the church, the body of Christ. Now, what does all that mean? Each of us, a lot of us have taken those temperament tests, I'm an extrovert. That means I can run my mouth forever. Others are introverts, just like they're the flies on the wall kind of thing. Well, what does that mean in terms of the church when you talk about these gifts? Because apostles, those are people who go out and start new things. They train other people how to do things. And there are a lot of professions out there like that. A lot of times, those are the creative, artsy people who go out and do things. The evangelists, that's me. We can talk a mile a minute. We like going out, meeting new people, and introducing them to Christ, and don't think anything of it. Well, not everybody fits in there. Those two are probably the strongest two that would probably be considered extroversion because it's getting out. The other three are really more internal within the workings of the church. Because when you look at it, it says pastors and teachers and prophets. Those are people who speak internally to the church in one way or the other. Now, the misnomer is this. Everybody thinks the pastor has all five of those gifts. That's not true. We all have aspects of them, but all of us have at least two of them that are dominant in our lives. Sometimes your best evangelists are the people sitting in the back of the church in the youth group eating sunflower seeds, or whatever it is. And so what the church is supposed to do, as it says, equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. So if we get people out into the marketplace as well as internally within the church, I think one of the most interesting things we discovered when we did our cohorts with the pastors, one of our meetings, one of the pastors says, well, I'm a teacher, and that's the kind of person. Then he realized most of his congregation, that's the kind of people they are because they ascribe to that ministry style. There were no evangelists. And he jokingly said, the next hire I'm going to make is an evangelist.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lorenzo Peterson, affectionately called Pastor Zoe. And this episode is sponsored by Warner Pacific University, founded by the Church of God in 1937. We are raising students to have Christ-centered leadership and service. And our motto here comes from Jeremiah 29:11. Of course, that talks about purpose. And our own logo, WP, stands for with purpose. And listen, we are igniting a flame of purpose that can never be extinguished in our students, and we are very excited about that. And we are inviting you pastors and community leaders to re-engage with Warner Pacific University as we continue to raise up leaders to go out and do God's bidding in the kingdom. We are shaped by this movement's values. Our shared story, 90 years strong, is simply this. From the old hymn, because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know who holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. For more information about what God is doing at his university, you can go to our website, warnerpacific.edu.
And so the body is not whole if we only do one thing. And so that's going to be really important that we understand that if we're going to equip the saints, that also means we're going to release them and mobilize them to do the work that they're good at. But churches struggle with this because so many pastors hold on to everything. Some out of insecurity, but for the most part, most of them is simply because they want stuff to get done. And they don't trust the people sitting in the pews, or it takes them too long, or they don't do it the right way, the way the pastor likes it, whatever it is, but they hold on to that, and that stifles the church. And every time a pastor leaves, it's really funny. You talk to people within the church, and all these people start doing stuff, and they're excited. Well, pastor wouldn't let me do this before, and you just think, oh my goodness, how did we miss the boat? So really, it's very important that we understand what equippers are. It's not a golf club.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I noticed too, like you're getting that there are a lot of struggles toward like having an equipping ministry or culture at your church. And it could be some of the reasons like you talked about, like the current leadership puts a lid and a cap and control, and oftentimes for the right reasons too. Like, hey, we don't want people to be led astray, so we're going to control this. And again, you do want controls in there, but I've just found you want things to be like low control, but you want to increase the accountability. And so it could be that there's a lid because of those control needs. And again, could be for a good motive on the inside. The other reason is that it could be that, Fred, you outlined those 5 different components, the gifts that Paul talked about in Ephesians. If you are one of those and not all of them, some of those could be scary to you or boring to you or just even opposite to you. And so you talked about a pastor who tends to be more of a teacher mindset. There's a community of people who value that teaching. Well, guess what? New innovative ideas that maybe an apostle or a prophet might bring to the table. Well, wait, no, we tried that, 5 years ago, and that didn't work out. That you could almost create this siloing of ministry models. So I think sometimes there's fear that gets crept into it. But our vision statement, even of that we want to be pioneers and developers, pioneering and developing a Jesus-shaped landscape of abiding, equipping missionary. We want to embrace both of those and have a place where everybody gets to play. We want pastors and teachers to flourish and be the gift that they are to the body. What a beautiful gift they are. But we don't want to value those roles to the exclusion of like the apostle, prophet, and evangelist. We want both of those to play, and we know that we're going to have to hold those two things in tension in there. And so, yeah, I think those are a few of the reasons why I think people struggle with that. What else do you guys think? Are there other reasons why it would be difficult to have an equipping culture?
Well, the other thing I was going to say is I remember in an organization I was involved with, one of the things that happened to their detriment was they were fearful of people doing new ideas because they didn't know how to put boundaries on them. And it was almost like watching a person on his left foot, he's got a water ski on, and on his right foot, he's got a wakeboard. They ride totally different. And how do I, with one boat, pull them both at the same time?
That's so good. Yeah, because that text precluded unity. Like that was unity that Paul talks about, but then he embraces the idea of diversity. That's really good right there. Jerry, sorry, I cut you off. But
yeah, no, I was going to say just, I think one of our struggles is the way we do church. I mean, the way we have elevated the Sunday service, the Sunday centric, it's all about a person on the platform giving a great message. There's worship, there's some other elements that go into that, but really the worship is the build up to the speaker, and it doesn't lend credence to the other gifts. And Fred's talking about the fact that he got this new expensive driver, right? But Fred, how many times around do you use a driver? Maybe
that's good.
14 times. So you've got 14 other clubs in your bag legally. You've got
technically you use your driver because you don't use it on the par threes.
Yeah, exactly. So you're using it maybe 14 times, maybe less. And so you've got your drivers, you've got your woods, your irons, your wedges, your putter, which you use the most. Same in the church. I mean, not so if you use that illustration as the driver's the main speaker, the main teacher, you're not going to have a really good game unless you're using all of the clubs. And I think that's for me a good illustration of the church. I mean, we need our apostles, our evangelists, and for me, I've shared with you guys the fact that I struggled a lot in my ministry because of the expectation that is put on us of pastor teacher needs to, we need to have those gifts. We can all develop those gifts, right? For sure. But as I took the APES test, I'm an evangelist prophet, right? And so, and I'm an introvert too. So, so that is, that's a struggle being an evangelist. But what that says to me is that I'm concerned about lost people, and I often get frustrated with my brothers and sisters who don't care for or don't want to develop things around lost people, right? And and as a prophet, I see I see the issues and I see the struggles, and oftentimes want to speak into those things. So for a lot of years in ministry, I struggled with the expectation of being a shepherd. I had to learn to do those things because that was expected at the job, but it was out of my giftedness, which, I had shepherds in my congregation. So when people were sick in the hospital, people would go and visit them. But oftentimes, I'd be maybe the third or fourth one to go visit someone. And the dear saint would say, "It's about time, Pastor. No one from the church has been here," when I knew for a fact that other shepherds,
Yeah.
people who
Yeah.
loved on them, had been there, right? And so it's
Yeah.
that expectation that even in the culture of the church that says, Pastor, you need to be the shepherd, you need to be the main teacher. And so, we've kind of, I think, created this culture where the other gifts are not celebrated and highlighted. And I think we need to somehow figure out a way to do that.
Yeah, I relate to that too, Jerry. We're living under that expectation of kind of like pastor teacher. That was what I had been raised in, valued, understood. But as I came to understand my gifting more, I don't know if I'm an apostolic prophet or a prophetic apostle, but those are the two that are kind of there at the top for me. I think it depends upon my environment. Right now, it feels like
Mhm.
apostolic, new ideas and new innovations are regularly the things that are stewing in my head. But yeah, trying to like figure out how to be something different than what my culture did, and then feeling like I was letting down the job description or the
Right.
cultural expectations that were there as well. Fred, what do you already mentioned evangelist, but what do you have you learned to understand your ministry identity to be?
Well, when I first took the APEST, which you're talking about, which is the acronym for those five ministries, I was so high off the chart on the evangelist. But
Hmm.
what was weird to me was the second one was apostle, and I was like,
Hmm.
hold on. And I don't see myself out there starting churches. And I was fortunate that I was with a counselor who administered the test or the assessment, and he said, no, that's not it. He said, your second is what is the primary is what you are. The second one is a vehicle in which you use. And he knew me well enough. He said, you train a lot of people in evangelism, don't you? That's the
Hmm.
apostolic side of you. Teach people how to do what you do and then turn them loose. And
Yeah.
so that helped me to understand how I am an equiper of
Yeah.
people with what my gift is. Now, if you ask me to be, to be a shepherd, I can do it because you
Right.
get all these numbers that rates you. The highest two numbers, I was 30 something, like 39, 40 on the one, and then right behind it, I was in the low 30s. Everything else was in the teens or lower. I can do those things, but it's a labor of love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And I learned that about myself early on in my ministry, because one of the things I found out about myself early on when I was in Youth for Christ, I'm what they call a large group type of person. I thrive in large groups and I'm okay in small groups. But
Hmm.
one-on-one is where I always struggled, because counseling someone, I would have never made it as a counselor. I'd be
Hmm.
like, would you just get over it and get on with your life? That's just not who I am. I'm not gonna be there for the next 16 years holding your hand. So you start learning, and what I had to
Yeah.
learn to do was, because I was the leader of this group, I surrounded myself with a lot of counselors,
It's good.
one-on-one people. I talked to the
Yep.
group up here, but they did where the real ministry was in here. Because I can do one-on-one, but only for so long.
This episode is sponsored by Servant Solutions, serving those who serve since 1949. Born from the Church of God's vision to care for ministers and their families, Servant Solutions has grown from a simple pension board into a trusted partner for retirement planning, financial education, and holistic support for church staff. We remain dedicated to empowering those in ministry with wise planning and stewardship tools for every season. Learn how Servant Solutions can help you plan faithfully and care well for those you serve. Visit servantsolutions.org to find out more.
Love it.
Yeah.
I'm noticing that a lot of our examples are like learning your identity in Christ, yes, as this, redeemed, saved, forgiven son, daughter of the King, but also like how God has wired you to operate. So there's that part. But then I love, Fred, how you were talking about that you got to surround yourself with people who are different than you, that there's something beautiful, that context where there's that kind of contrast is a really, really, really good one. I think, too, one of the key things we've got to move from doing ministry, getting whatever job done, however we've learned how to do it, to developing ministers. I even remember reading some of our historical records of early pioneering Church of God leaders, and that was one of the key things that they counted, like how many ministers are we developing? And again, Jerry, you had mentioned it. It's not so much about like who's preaching and leading the service. How many ministers in all the regular places, not just on Sunday for that hour and a half or whatever your time frame is, but how many ministers are we developing that operate Monday, Tuesday, all the way throughout the week, and in all of the different sectors of society that they may be planted in? This is really about equipping the saints for the work of ministry, or the priesthood of all believers is what it's oftentimes called about. And really, it's got to be all believers.
For me, a key word is validation, because we think being the preacher or the upfront person is important, and everything is not as important. That I've got to validate the people who don't do that. I've got to let them know, Billy Graham, what I appreciate about him when he was alive, he spoke one time and he said, yeah, lots of people come forward at our crusade, but we're smart enough to know that it was grandma or uncle so-and-so, whatever, who started with that person down in the trenches. We get to reap the benefits of their work when we ask people to come forward, because somebody intervened in their life to get them where they are. So the hand can't say to the foot, I don't need you.
Yeah. Right.
So it's a body of Christ.
Good.
Yeah, I think, it's a body, and it's a family on mission. It should be a family on mission, right? And that's
absolutely.
I think that's where we need to work on a shift in culture. Michael, you talked about priesthood of all believers. I think we have developed just a consumer mentality in the church where people come to receive and not to give. And I think, like Fred said, we need to start celebrating people and their giftedness and telling the stories of this evangelist in our congregation who shared Jesus with someone, or this apostle who started this new kingdom business, with that in mind. And we're going to grow the things we celebrate. And I think too often we've and here's the prophet in me, and I think we've celebrated the wrong things, right? We've celebrated the upfront, we've celebrated the Sunday, and I think it's time for us to change culture, and that's probably a whole nother podcast. How do we change the culture in our church, change management? Because you can go in and say, all right, now we're going to be all about the fivefold ministry, and you can lose people, blow the thing up. And
yeah, you can.
Now that you've been prophetic, have you found your cave to hide in?
That's right. No, my man cave. Yeah.
But what you're saying is true, because the attractional church right now in many of our minds is big, large, and in some cases the best worship band with a light show and smoke. It's funny. We were at a meeting a while back, Jerry and I were at in LA, and the service is going on during worship. All of a sudden people see smoke and they thought there was a fire.
That's right.
You remember that? But it was the folks releasing smoke from a fog machine or whatever.
The fog machine, yeah.
And I just laughed. I was like, really?
Cool lighting effects, but I don't know.
That's good.
But we think that we can't be entertainment oriented.
Right.
We're ministry oriented. And if we're going to be ministry oriented, it takes an army of people to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't do it. It's not one size fits all. Like, Jesus is the hero of the body, not the pastor, no matter what your title or rank happens to be. And he has a body. Everybody gets to play. And it's so much better. So much better that way. What about practically? Like, what do you guys think? What would it look like? I get it, Jerry, you're saying change management. I think it is season 2. We need to talk about those types of things. But where would somebody practically start to begin to develop an equipping culture in a local ministry?
I think it starts with de-churchifying or demystifying these definitions of what a prophet is, what an evangelist is, what a teacher, and get some real practical working definitions of what those look like. And there's some great material out there that you can use, some great definitions out there of what that looks like. And I think giving your folks a free test to test what they are. I think that's a great thing. You start normalizing that language, those definitions, then get people excited about what area they might fall into, and then start telling, again, like I said, start telling some stories about people who are really pressing into or thriving in their gifts, and celebrate those things.
And I
That's
think
really good.
within that culture, if you guys remember in one of our retreats last year, one of the pastors really took to heart something we said, and I forget which one of us said it, but we said it's okay to fail forward. Many people are afraid to exercise their gifts because they don't want to fail or mess up. And many pastors sometimes don't want to make room for people to mess up because they feel like, I got to clean it up, kind of thing. But it's okay to fail as you start, as long as you fail forward. All of us have fallen off a bicycle, but we still learned how to ride that bike.
Yep.
And ministry is the same way. Nobody starts out batting 1,000,
So true.
and the best hitters in sports, ever. It's just like 4 or 5 of them. Their lifetime batting average is right around 400. That means every 10 times they go to bat, they hit the ball 4 times.
Yeah.
And how many fairways you hit with that new driver, Fred? That's what we want to know. Because even the best pros, they miss their share of fairways.
Oh yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. And I'm glad you said that, because the other thing I learned about golf, listening to the pros talk, they said what most people don't understand, they think that this is a gift we have. They don't realize, just with my one club alone, I'm out there 2 hours hitting balls with that one club. Now, if I do that with all 14 of them, think how many hours that is.
It's a lot of
28
hours.
hours. So they're constantly working on it. One guy said, yeah, I used to do it until my hands started to bleed. Over time, they get better and they don't spend nearly as much time practicing, but they always practice. So no one's perfect.
Yeah, that's good. I think maybe that's a good spot to even land from. There's this celebrity culture, this idea of perfection even that has crept into ministry circles, where we feel like it's all on our shoulders. I've got to do it well enough. And I'd imagine that there's just some lies that don't line up with the gospel that I know that I've believed and lived under, and that others may be as well. So anybody have a closing thought to wrap us up with, or to put a period at the end of this episode?
And I think we've already said it. The first step would be, as leadership, is to develop culture.
Yeah.
The culture of the early church is said, in Acts 2, they gathered on a regular basis. And then they went out and did the work of the ministry. And whatever they did, they brought back to the church. And I think that's the culture that we have to get, so that people don't think, oh, I come to church to be entertained or to be talked to. I come to get equipped to go out.
Right.
That's
And I
really
think,
good.
I think too, as we conclude, it's so important for pastors to identify some of those early adopters, some of those people who are ripe for some one-on-one discipleship in their area of giftedness. And to be spending time really pouring into those folks, because truth of the matter is, not everybody is going to embrace the concept of fivefold ministry. Not everybody, not everybody's going to, want to immediately go from consumer to minister. So it's important, I think, to identify those that are ripe and really pour into those folks, and work on our equipping. Well, thanks, guys. It's been a great episode.
So good.
Thanks everybody for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time.
I'm coming to get you, Jerry.
Oh yes, he is on the Catalytic podcast. Can't wait.
Take care, buddy.
Hey, come west, young man. Come west, young woman. If you're sensing a call to join the work of pioneering and developing a Jesus-shaped landscape in the Northwest, we want to hear from you. Whether you're a pastor, a leader, a church planter, simply curious about how God might use you here, take the step. Visit chognorthwest.org/come west and fill out the form there. Let's dream together about what God can do through you in the Northwest. That's chognorthwest.org/come west. Come west.